As Michigan's most powerful and influential voice for business, the Michigan Chamber of Commerce stands ready to serve you, whether advocating at the Capitol on your behalf or helping connect you to people and resources that can help. Add your voice to ours. Make My Chamber your chamber today. Go to mychamber.com, that's MICHAMBER.com, to learn more now.
Naomba sheria.
I'm asking for justice.
Naomba sheria.
I'm asking for justice.
Naomba sheria.
I'm asking for justice. I'm asking for justice for Patrick.
Justice for Patrick.
Justice for Patrick.
Black Lives Matter.
It's been several weeks since 26-year-old Patrick Lyoya, a Congolese refugee, was fatally shot by a white Grand Rapids police officer.
Hey, stay in the car! Stay in the car! Stay in the car! Get in the car! Dude, I'm stopping you. Do you have a license?
Video footage released by police shows that in an interaction at about 8 a.m. April 4th, an officer told Lyoya his license plate didn't match his car. They ended up in a struggle on the ground over the officer's taser. The officer yelled, "Let go of the taser," several times just before he shot Lyoya in the back of the head. Now, the Reverend Al Sharpton is in Michigan for Patrick Lyoya's funeral. An investigation is underway, and activists are calling for change, saying his death is yet another example of a black man dying at the hands of police. And what's more, some have said it was inevitable, given the history of Grand Rapids and the history of policing in it.
One of the speakers, she said, "We have been warning you about GRPD's excessive force since 2020, since the protests over the death of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor."
Grand Rapids prided itself on being a little more polite than that. You know, the racism is there, just like in any other community, but they wouldn't say it to your face, sort of.
The police had already pulled out guns on kids in Grand Rapids. That had been noted, handcuffing 11-year-olds.
On this episode, we look into the concerns in Michigan's second largest city, what it's been like, and what came before the death of Patrick Lyoya. I'm Kerry Jr. II, and this is On the Line. Well, first off, thanks for taking the time to do this. I know it's been a busy couple of weeks for you. You were out late covering protests, and you've been covering a lot of things in these last few weeks. So I'm just checking in.
Yeah, no, I'm good. It's definitely a lot. It's really fast paced.
That's Free Press reporter Arpan Lobo. He's based in Grand Rapids and typically covers politics. He's been covering the death of Patrick Lyoya as of late, and he called in to give some context to what's going on. And what have you been seeing over these last few days?
Yeah, these protests, the ones I've been to, they've ranged from maybe around 50, 60 people to several hundred people marching through the streets of downtown Grand Rapids.
All power to the people.
One of the streets that demonstrators have marched on was actually renamed Breonna Taylor Way in 2020 because she was born in Grand Rapids. And their message has been clear. They want justice for Patrick. And for them, this means that the officer involved in the shooting is named. The officer involved in the shooting gets charged. And that the Grand Rapids Police Department addresses what people think is a culture of excessive force.
This happened here. It's no longer not a Grand Rapids thing. This happened here, and it's going to continue to happen if we stop fighting.
They think that was what happened to Patrick, and that if it weren't for this excessive force, he might not have been killed. It's loud, but you can tell that there's kind of a bit of underlying pain from the protesters as they march, as they chant.
Patrick Lyoya! Patrick Lyoya!
And I know the officer is yet to be named and is on paid leave, but what's the status of any official investigation into Patrick's death?
The Grand Rapids Police Department has referred everything to the Michigan State Police, which is currently conducting its investigation. The MSP has said that they are placing this at higher priority, kind of given the scrutiny the incident is under. So we don't have a timeline, though, of when this investigation will be complete and if and when anything will come of it.
What's been the response from community members that weren't at the protest?
Yeah, city leaders, I believe the city manager, Mark Washington, who is Black, mentioned, he goes, it's another incident we have where a Black man loses his life at the hands of a police officer. And what Washington said was that it would be totally understandable for people to, show their emotion through these demonstrations and protests. Chief Winstrom has been with the GRPD for only about a little more than a month now. And so he was saying during that Wednesday press conference when they released the footage, he was just saying how difficult of a situation this was for the department.
And how has Patrick's family responded?
Expectedly, it's been very, very tough for them. They are Congolese refugees, so English is not their first language. They held a press conference with Ben Crump and with another lawyer. Just through a translator, they were expressing their, kind of unimaginable grief.
And I see this officer fighting with my son. My heart is broken.
One thing that's kind of stuck out to me is Patrick's mother, through a translator, she said, we left the Democratic Republic of the Congo because we thought we were escaping violence and persecution, only for her son to end up dying in the United States. So it's been a very tough, obviously a very tough time for that family and those close to them.
Now I want to get a better understanding of the community, whether that it's socially, politically, and economically. Can you just tell us a little bit about what the social, political makeup is of Grand Rapids?
Yeah, Grand Rapids is probably best known for a few of its famous families. If you go to downtown Grand Rapids, you'll see two names in a lot of places, and those names are DeVos,
as in the former U.S. Secretary of Education,
and Van Andel,
co-founder of the Amway Corporation with Betsy DeVos's father-in-law.
The major industries in Grand Rapids are things like furniture, like Steelcase, is based in Grand Rapids. And so there is a lot of working class individuals that kind of work and live in the city. I think it's kind of like a microcosm of a lot of Midwestern cities that while there are some areas that maybe could use a bit more attention, there are other areas that are getting a lot of growth. It's about 200,000 people. The majority of Grand Rapids residents are white. I think 18% is the exact figure for the percentage of Black residents. There's also other communities as well.
Mm-hmm. And in the political makeup, where do they fall on the scale?
The city of Grand Rapids proper generally votes in favor of Democrats, but Kent County as a whole, where Grand Rapids is kind of it's a bit more split along those lines. Grand Rapids does kind of serve as a Democratic base, but when you think of West Michigan, generally it's considered a Republican or red part of the state.
Sometimes I feel like, we know when we think of Michigan, they know Detroit and they'll say Flint for various different reasons. But sometimes I feel like people sleep on Grand Rapids. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so.
That's Alex Forrest, VP of Curatorial and Collections at the Grand Rapids Public Museum.
Recently, in the past decade or so, I think, Grand Rapids has started to turn some heads, making some of those lists that people put out, good places to live, good places to raise a family. Housing tends to be maybe a little bit more affordable here than in Southeast Michigan sometimes. And all those beautiful Lake Michigan beaches are close by. So the word's getting out.
In order to better understand the Grand Rapids Arpan was describing, we wanted to get a better historical perspective of Michigan's other big city. So we spoke to two historians, including Alex, who lives in the area, roughly a mile away from the shooting, he told us. Walk us through briefly the founding of Grand Rapids.
People have been coming to the Grand River for thousands and thousands of years. The Anishinaabe people who, lived in Michigan long before any European settlers were here in the early 1800s when settlers first started coming. The natural resources of the region were definitely part of it.
When does Black history in Grand Rapids begin?
Well, like it begins when the state of Michigan begins, right?
That's Randall Maurice Jelks, author of the book African Americans in the Furniture City, The Struggle for Civil Rights in Grand Rapids. More from him after the break, when we get into troubling Grand Rapids history. Police pulling guns on teens, and some of the reform measures that came before Patrick Lyoya.
As Michigan's leading statewide business advocacy organization, the Michigan Chamber of Commerce is on the job every day standing up for job providers in the legislative, political, and legal arenas. We are the unified voice of thousands of members who employ over 1 million Michiganders. We work with trade associations and local chambers of commerce of every size and kind in all 83 counties of the state. We know business in Michigan. Learn more today about how we can protect, connect, and strengthen your business. Whether that's advocating on your behalf at the Capitol, helping meet your informational, training, and networking needs, or boosting your bottom line visibility and voice, we're on the job for you. Make my chamber your chamber. Go to mychamber.com, that's MICHAMBER.com, to learn more now.
Grand Rapids is founded as a city in 1850. There are already documented free people of color, all in the area as farmers and other things.
We're back with Randall Maurice Jelks, a professor of African American, and American Studies at the University of Kansas. He previously taught at Calvin College in Grand Rapids and wrote a book on the struggle for civil rights in the area. He also still has family there. When the first industry becomes established in Grand Rapids, how does that tie into the history of African Americans in Grand Rapids?
Post-Civil War, the manufacturers are eager to cut down the hardwood forests and make furniture. And Black men and women who came to the area worked in barrel making factory and cut down trees.
One of the things that we do know, thanks to the work of some of the historians who've written about the history of race in Grand Rapids, is that there was what was called a gentleman's agreement among the furniture factory owners in Grand Rapids not to hire Black workers.
Alex Forrest again, of the Grand Rapids Public Museum.
They worked in the hospitality industry, in hotels, in department stores.
And the Black population remained small in Grand Rapids until just after World War II, because there are no industries really inviting them. As Black people come from the South for various places for their own economic interests, the first thing that Grand Rapids does is hire a few Black police officers to be the guardians of their communities. Meaning, keep your people in the neighborhood. Don't let the bad guys come into town. So just like Detroit, Grand Rapids suddenly has this influx of Black people for 1945, 1950s, 60s. They're all coming from the Deep South, mainly from Mississippi. They come in before the World War begins and after, and they work for GM. It was an auto industry, and that really carries a lot of Black folks to work.
And so how did that diversification go over? What have been, in addition to the challenges you've already outlined in terms of access to certain jobs, what other challenges did minority groups encounter?
One of the stories that we tell there is about the development of a neighborhood in Northeast Grand Rapids called Auburn Hills that was put together by 4 African-American individuals, just an average middle-class neighborhood built in the 1960s, because before then, Grand Rapids, once again, like most other cities in the United States, had a pretty restrictive redlining process. Another very contentious time in Grand Rapids, like in other places, is the late 1960s, when kind of the very nice public high school in that neighborhood called South High was closed was a point of pride. It was where Gerald R. Ford, president of the United States, had gone to school, good sports teams. And then all of a sudden it's gone. Many African-American students who went to school there were then bused to other high schools around Grand Rapids. And that caused all kinds of dissension, and was one of the things that led to what's called the uprising, or sometimes the riots in Grand Rapids, which took place in 1967.
There's a riot in over 100 cities. Grand Rapids also has what is called a riot or urban rebellion, or whatever you want to choose to call it, in response to being hassled by police, being challenged by urban renewal. Grand Rapids Black communities got cut in half, just as did Detroit. And the police were, particularly as more Black people came into the city, more and more, quote unquote, tough on crime.
And so how has that struggle evolved over time? And how does that bring us to today? Can you fill in that gap? Mm-hmm.
Well, when I came to Grand Rapids in 1983, we were working toward a model of working with communities using crime prevention coordinators. The idea was not law enforcement to corral us, but law enforcement to help people navigate troubled incidents. Police increased because the war on drugs allowed it to increase. And so it became more, the relationship between police community became more and more hostile.
It's where I leave sort of my scholarly knowledge and go more into my own personal lived experience growing up in Grand Rapids. And I think that it's just sort of this cascade of disinvestment in certain communities, certain neighborhoods, and certain areas of the city that went on for decades. I think it just builds and builds over time. And now I think that in contrast to some of those sort of nice gung-ho articles that you see about Grand Rapids is this great place to raise a family, I've started to see a few say, unless you're Black.
Look, a young Black person with a college degree will find it very difficult to find a job in corporate industry in Grand Rapids. This is the question I get all the time. Why would I want to stay in a place that is constantly locking me out?
I do want to ask about the refugee community. Like, has Grand Rapids historically had a large refugee community there?
Yeah, the refugee history in Grand Rapids really began when Gerald Ford became president after Richard Nixon resigned office. And because the war in Vietnam was ending, Gerald Ford used lots of different agencies in the Grand Rapids area to help resettle Vietnamese refugees. And this has now become Grand Rapids is seen as a model kind of city for resettling various people from parts of the world in the city.
But as we've noted, more recently, minority groups have reported concerns in Grand Rapids, particularly when it comes to policing. And for more on that, we turn back to Free Press reporter Arpan Lobo. Arpan, can you walk us through some specifics of the recent concerns before Patrick Lyoya's death?
Yeah, so I talked to Ven Johnson, who's an attorney that's representing the Lyoya family. He's also representing someone else in federal court that during 2020 protests over the deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, the protests that took place in Grand Rapids, there was an incident. It's a bit of a viral video. You might have seen it, but in the incident, there's a man. He's kind of standing in front of a group of Grand Rapids Police Department officers, and he's taunting them, but he's not making any physical threats, but one of the officers fired a tear gas canister at him, and Johnson said it hit him in the shoulder. Johnson said it's examples like that kind of show a culture of excessive force within the police department.
And I understand there's been other incidents, such as one in 2017 with an 11-year-old girl getting handcuffed and a Marine veteran wrongfully being turned over to immigration in 2018. Also, we've heard others with guns being drawn on teens of color.
There have been other incidents of the police department's kind of conduct coming under criticism. In 2019, the Michigan Department of Civil Rights opened an investigation to see whether there was a pattern and practice of misconduct with people of color, and if they were being treated at a disparate rate by the police department. That investigation was ultimately never finished. The Department of Civil Rights said that they didn't have the resources to do it. They are still looking at 29 individual complaints against the Grand Rapids Police Department just this week. There's been an effort from the Department of Civil Rights to see if the AG's office in particular can bring more resources to get this investigation back to life.
Anything else we should know?
One thing I think I can mention is that I remember in June of 2020, City Manager Mark Washington sent the mayor, Rosalind Bliss, a memo kind of outlining this laundry list of different reforms and accountability measures that the police department was going to take. And these include, bumping up the hours of de-escalation training, making sure that officers are trained to put themselves in a situation where they aren't even close to, a person. And one thing that I asked and I didn't get an answer from the department on was like, where did this, kind of go missing? Because if you just look at that list of items and then you look at the footage of the interaction where Patrick was shot by a police officer, you see that there's not really a lot of de-escalation efforts taken. And I think people will point to, well, it's a difficult situation. If you're ever in that scenario, you don't know what exactly a person could have. You don't know everything about the situation, but I think that when protesters in particular talk about, that interaction, there's just this feeling that, a shooting could have been avoided.
The world's eyes are on Grand Rapids. What would you say to them about what they need to know about Grand Rapids?
I think that in many ways, Grand Rapids is a microcosm of any other city.
Historian Alex Forrest.
Where any other of the, too many killings by police have taken place. And so, it's kind of a pessimistic note to end on, I think, but it's just a sad situation. Like, the broad strokes are the same anywhere you look.
What's shocking for the people of Grand Rapids,
Randall Maurice jokes,
is that their perception of themselves is that this is not our best self. Right? But I'm arguing here, this has always been inevitable because city leaders, economic leaders, and all other people refuse to deal with the kind of national problem that we have, this society of separate societies going on. And as long as the country refuses to deal with that, even a place like Grand Rapids is going to face these issues.
Did you speak with your family when this happened?
Oh, of course.
I mean, yeah, I imagine, but
yeah.
What was that conversation like?
My son's a business owner downtown. I have a son and daughter and wife who was a former city official in Grand Rapids. So yeah, we all spoke, because this was horrible.
And what was some of the feelings you all had?
Well, I mean, of course, I won't speak for them because they're the adults, but I think we generally consider this is not now. It's a real setback to trying to get people at the table. It's a real setback to trying to figure out new strategies for making the city more inclusive for everybody.
Thank you to Randall Jokes, Alex Forrest, and Free Press reporter Arpan Lobo for their time. This episode was produced by me and Darcy Moran with help from Adrian Roberts. Anjanette Delgado and Marianne Streeman are our executive producers, and Peter Bhatia is our editor. The music for the show is called Fort Trumbull and was produced by DJ Lost Boy. If you're enjoying the show, please leave a comment, like, subscribe, and don't forget to share it with your friends and family. See you next week.